just a hack. It's just an absolute hack. And he gets his ass kicked by his teammates every week. It's just, it's terrible. It's just terrible.
Welcome, everybody, to Hack City with a special, I guess also surprise guest. There was no tease on the show. CAA Commissioner Joe DAntonio is joining us. It's been a while since, Joe, you've been on the show, probably about 2 years. I remember I was still living in my parents' house when we last talked, but some things have changed, but a lot of things have changed with the CAA also. Glad to have you on today. Thank you so much for making the time.
Well, Sean, thanks for having me, and don't be a stranger. Let's do this again sooner rather than later. How's that sound?
Definitely would like to. I guess odd start here. Some people are concerned about this, but Joe and I have recently been selected to vote in the FCS Top 25 polls nationally. So I think having this, I might have to interview a couple other FCS commissioners so as to not be as biased. But I had to start with you, former commissioner of the conference that Joe and myself played in. A big change here. You went with the name change from the Colonial to the Coastal. Can you walk me through the process and the decision to make that choice? I've seen a lot of feedback on both sides. I personally love the change to the name, but can I get a little bit of a background for the process and then the decision to move?
Sure, Sean. So, I'm gonna go back to. I may take it in reverse order if that's okay, but let's start with just the decision. I'm gonna go back to what I said in our press release. It's really a culmination of 3 years of work, right? And certainly you're never done with the work, but we started with the aspect of wanting to expand both the full member conference and the football conference to put us in a position to make sure that we were going to be both sustainable and competitive going forward as a group. And in a point in time within the structure of college athletics, where there's a tremendous amount of instability. We just even saw some announcements yesterday that would show that. Okay, I really think from a standpoint of stability, we've put both the CAA and the CAA football conference in a really good position. And I credit our presidents, our athletic directors, our SWAs, conference staff. Everyone worked together on these endeavors. And if it's really a culmination, then if you take it forward, we have it's a new group of members. We have a new geographic footprint that really extends up and down the entire Atlantic seaboard. New vision statement, continued commitment to excellence within the conference. And we just felt as though it was a point in time where the name didn't really represent who we were in terms of, if you go back to the genesis, the almost 40-year history of the conference, 75 years of CAA football, if you go back to the Yankee Conference and the A10, then the CAA, back 40 years ago when the conference was formed, Colonial was very appropriate, somewhat based around the Virginia area, etc. Now, when you look at our expansion and where we stretch from, if you add football and full member schools together, we go from Orono, Maine to Charleston, South Carolina, really up and down the entire Atlantic seaboard. So we really just felt that the coastal word fit us, number one. Folks were really pleased with the acronym CAA. They felt that had some equity, some brand equity in it. So we wanted to try to maintain that if we could. We were able to find a word that began with C that really fit what we wanted to do, kept CAA, kept the logo, and we're going forward. The process, to answer your question about process, the full member board of directors kind of charged the conference with looking into this. We formed a subcommittee that consisted of presidents and athletic directors from both the full member conference as well as the football conference. Keep in mind, there are members of the football conference, that are not in the full member conference. So we combined everybody into a subcommittee. That subcommittee made the recommendation of really three things. Number one, changing the first word from Colonial to Coastal, keeping the CAA logo and word mark, and permitting us to go out and hire a third-party entity, which we did, to help us to create a little bit of a sizzle reel, which I thought really came out great, to help us not only announce the name when we did it a week ago, but also have that kind of to use as we go forward in our stadiums and arenas during the course of this upcoming year. So that's really what the process was. That's why we did it, and I'm happy to take any follow-up, but hopefully that gives you a little snapshot.
Well, I really like it. I feel like it's modern. I feel like it is professional. It sounds like a conference name. it makes sense to me, and I hope that listeners and fans of the CAA can reflect that. And change is tough. I grew up in DC. There's a football team here that's gone through 3 name changes in the last 6 years. So I've seen how people can react to something as simple as a name change for a conference. But the conference has also member changes, added NCA&T and Campbell this year. I spent some time at Campbell last year for the yearly FCS trip. Interesting school, very nice school, I thought. Good football program as well. They seem passionate about football. What drew you to adding those schools to the CAA, and then additionally the expectations for them moving forward?
Well, let's keep in mind that as it relates to a situation of how did we choose the schools that we added, right? We've added 5 institutions over the last 3 years.
Yep.
Really, there were 3 central pieces that we were focused on. Number one, and it just kind of goes back to what we just talked about, there needed to be a geographic fit, right? No disrespect to any schools out in the Midwest or on the West Coast, but they're just not a geographic fit. So that we wanted to kind of stay in that Atlantic coastline border. So that was number one. Number two, there needed to be a synergy and a commitment just to the overall academic aspect of what the institution is doing, both student athlete wise and student wise. And certainly in those two institutions that you just mentioned, as well as the other 3 that we've added, great institutions academically. Both of those institutions have some really great, not only academic programs, but are also certainly committed in that area and committed with their student athletes. And then finally, that last aspect, Sean, of being just committed to the overall well-being and development of their student athletes is something that we needed to see. And in both of those programs, we know that we have that. So if you fast forward then just to simply what's on the field for the upcoming season and what we're looking forward to, 2 really good institutions, football programs that I see kind of on the rise. Vincent Brown takes over at A&T, coming from the defensive coordinator at William & Mary. He's going to do a great job there. And obviously, Mike Minter, well-established at Campbell. Both gentlemen, established NFL careers, really good guys, gentlemen that care about certainly the winning of their football program, but also deeply care about the overall development of their student athletes. And that's what we're all about in the CAA when it's all said and done.
Now, I'm not asking you to disparage another commissioner or league or anything, but you spoke on keeping everything and all the programs, schools in the same geographical region. And we've seen in the FBS how there's been some straying away from that. Do you think that harms tradition of college football, or do you think that just general thoughts on deciding just, I guess, USC and UCLA joining the Big Ten? A lot of people, and you could even go back to Rutgers and Maryland doing that. Sure. Some people have thought that as negative. Some people see it as, I just want to see more good football, more good supporting it, more good softball. I mean, UCLA has a great softball team. And you have, it seems like, a different opinion on doing that regionally. Do you think that the student athletes having to travel those great distances take a toll on that? I don't see a lot of commissioners saying we want to keep everybody this close together and tight knit. Do you think it's an advantage to have everybody in the same region?
Well, here's the thing, right? Certainly, we value student athlete welfare in every decision that we make. It's very difficult for me to say that what is going on in terms of the movement of other schools and other conferences is good or bad. Certainly, you always like to see regional rivalries kept intact. I know I think that's an important part of what we do. But I think on the other side of that, Sean, you also have to understand when you're talking the aspect of FCS football versus the aspect of FBS football, you're really talking about 2 completely different things. Right. You're talking about the ability for those teams to be able to get on planes and fly to games. I'm not going to say it's easy, because no travel like that is easy, but it's just part of what they do. Whereas our programs, while we will have teams travel, one of the intentions of the expansion of the league and the growth of the league, and something that we've worked very closely with our athletic directors and presidents on, is trying to manage costs. You go back to the way I answered your first question. You may or may not recall, I mentioned two words. I mentioned sustainability and I mentioned competitiveness. And that's really been the driving force behind all the decisions that we've made. So in expanding the footprint of the football conference and allowing for there to be a greater level of regional games played, one of the scheduling pieces we've worked on is trying to limit, and you can't do it with Maine, right? Because Maine's a little bit of an outlier, but we have been able to create a scheduling format where we're limiting all of our other institutions to one in-flight conference a year, in conference flight a year,
Right.
playing an 8-game conference schedule, 4 on the road, 4 at home. Out of those games you play on the road, three of them are considered busable. Now, a team might fly on a busable game. That's their decision. But 3 of the 4 are considered busable. One of them will be a flight. So, that's how we're trying to manage the overall success of our league in terms of being both sustainable and also being very competitive.
I understand. I think we took maybe 1 flight, 2 flights max from Rhode Island. We took a bus down to Towson. We took a bus up to Maine. So I could see how that would. And then obviously, if we were playing a Kansas or Central Michigan to open the year, that would be a flight. But I guess that's coming from their budget.
Sure.
Some news came out in June this year. The NCAA was working on levying an $11 million minimum for teams to move from the FCS to the FBS. Are you in support of this move? Do you agree with at least that being the minimum? And then I guess general thoughts of the pros or cons of teams moving from FCS to FBS, because every time I see a team, I'm like, oh man, that was a good team that moved up. But then I can see the flip side of the coin. Sam Houston State did a lot for the FCS when they won a national championship, highly competitive, drew a lot of eyes, had a lot of really good players. And then you see a North Dakota State, a Villanova, good teams, good programs that have stayed in FCS level. So I guess general thoughts on the new, I guess, proposed minimum for moving up.
Yes, I'll answer it in 2 ways. Number one, just let's talk about institutional decisions,
Sure.
right? And I think we use the same mindset at the conference office and within our conference. We're going to continue as we go forward to make decisions that are in the best interest of the CAA. Those institutions that you mentioned, whether it's Kennesaw, James Madison, Sam Houston, they've made decisions that in their mind are in the best interest of their institutions to go from FCS to FBS. So you can't disparage or look down on anyone that's made that decision. If they think that's the best decision for their institution, then I give them a lot of credit, wish them luck, and hopefully it works out for them. Our job, obviously, at the FCS level is to try to be as successful as we can with the member institutions we have at the FCS level and try to run within our conference the best conference possible. And then in terms of the role that we play in the FCS championship, and I sit on some different committees with other commissioners, just trying to make sure that we're providing the best opportunity possible for the student athletes that are able to participate in that championship playoff field. So, that's part of it. In terms of the fee that you've mentioned, and I think most recent legislation has downgraded the entry fee. It was $5,000. I think the most recent piece of legislation I've seen that's going to be voted on here in a couple of months has increased it to $5 million. So you'll now have to pay $5 million as an entry fee. Here's what I'll say about the entry fee. You'd like to think that institutions that have made the decision are ready to go at all levels, right? Facility-wise, financial-wise.
Full commitment.
Right? If you're going to do it, you should be all in, and it should be the best decision for your institution.
Right.
So I don't look at the $5 million as a deterrent. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it. I have had one or two people say to me, well, maybe what you should do with the $5 million is put it in an escrow account, and once they prove that they're ready to go, maybe give it back to the institution. I think what it really is showing, Sean, is they want to put something in place, because $5,000 is probably way too low, right? They want to put something in place that if you're going to make the jump, that you're really committed to making the jump, and this isn't some decision that's just been kind of made off the cuff, which I'd hope nobody's doing anyways. But I think the $5 million puts some backing behind that.
I would say so. And then the programs and schools that have seemed to have the most momentum come from investment. It comes from facilities. It comes from recruiting. if you have a good NIL backing, good use of the transfer, everything that can prove solid commitment towards a program, whether even if you're just a good basketball school, Rhode Island, for example, fine at football, fine. I'm not gonna plead my case that they should be higher in the polls right now. I'll save that for my vote. But basketball, they invest in the basketball, and they show that even though they're not in the CAA, if they were to be, this is a product and how they've built their practice facilities, the coaches that they hire, the way that they manage upkeep and hire. That is a program and a sport that takes itself seriously. So having that, I think, is a good indicator of moving conferences if you can prove that you're taking it seriously and not just trying to get a couple years of exposure. Like we talk about Tarleton State when they came up. They said, okay, cool, we're moving up, and then in 2 years we're going to go right to FBS. And the initial reaction on the show, I say, was poor. I didn't enjoy that, but then started seeing a little bit of commitment, started seeing that they're really trying to go hard and push themselves forward. And I've kind of developed a respect of programs that are saying, okay, it's time. We're really going to go for it.
That's fair. Yeah, those are fair statements. It goes back to what I said too. If they've made the decision that that's in their best interest, give them credit and wish them well.
Right. Last question for you here, Joe. Every year, I guess the last couple years, we've done a yearly trip we put it to a fan vote of which FCS game to go see. I'll give you a special vote. Which game should Joe and I make a venture to? I'm partial to the CAA because I don't have to travel out west. We've been to South Dakota State to see them play North Dakota State, and we were at Campbell last year because they won the vote. If you had a vote to place, where would you send us this year?
Well, I'm going to be biased, obviously,
Sure.
right? Why don't you do what I'm doing and take in a double dip on September 23rd? You can see your beloved Rhode Island Rams take on Villanova at Villanova, and then you can jump right in the car and go up and see UNH at Delaware at night. So there's an option for you. 2-for-1 special.
Delaware. I've got good memories of Delaware Stadium at night. We got a good win there in 2019. I was happy about that. But awesome. I mean I like the vote. Mr. DAntonio. I think we're going to have to pitch that, and maybe the CAA fans and listeners can get behind you on that. We'll put that in as the first official vote for the season. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Would love to do it again. Would love to get you in season, get your thoughts on maybe how the playoffs are shaping out, how the teams are going, all of that. So thank you again for your time.
Happy to do it anytime. Never a problem.
Of course, CAA Commissioner Joe DAntonio.